doesn't involve people turning into animals is actually realistic. So Kafka is a depressing person, but also sometimes where we think he's being overtly depressing, where we think he's painting a really negative view of justice, he's actually being realist. And when we think of him as being sort of thinking that everything is bad and worthless, that's not quite a true picture. He was heavily involved in doing good works on some level. Okay, so I throw that out there mainly to just suggest that maybe he's more complicated than just a negative writer. Very quickly, how many people have read a Kafka story? Alright, like, what have people read? Just shout out the names of stories.
Metamorphosis.
Metamorphosis? Metamorphosis?
Same and Hunger Artist.
Hunger Artist, cool.
Judgment.
Yeah, okay. Metamorphosis is probably his most famous work. This is a question open to everyone except probably Alla and Alex. Give me as many negative epithets for things that happen in Kafka as you can. Like, and not necessarily things that you've read in Kafka, but things that you just associate with the term Kafka-esque.
Twisted.
Twisted, sure. There are more, like negative things.
Like the Great Abyss.
The Great Abyss, sure, finally, yes.
Like with the monkey speaking to the story about the monkey speaking to people, and the sort of abyss between them and the abyss to which the monkey speaks.
The Report to the Academy, yeah. A lot of Kafka's work is sort of, hi, existential abyss. Hello.
Just to play devil's advocate here, I find twistedness and surrealism to be very good qualities in works.
See, that's where I'm going with my talk, so I'm going to cut you off right
yeah.
there. Just negative attributes for now.
I love this.
Like a certain non sequitur elements of the plot.
Sure, and actually that connects with the abyss thing, because you're often put in the place of a character who wants there to be sequitur, who wants everything to somehow make sense, and it just doesn't, right? There's one other that I'm actually surprised that people read Metamorphosis. Absurd. Alienation, right? One of the things that happens in Metamorphosis, the main character turns into a bug. This is already kind of weird. But then, his parents and family react to this by, oh god, it's a bug, shoo, shoo. There's a horrible scene where his father hurls a half-eaten apple at him. It strikes him in the back, his sort of carapace, and lodges itself in his carapace, where he cannot get it out with his, insectoid limbs, because he kind of looks like this. Unknown number of legs, and some antenna things coming out, and then giant shell. And there's an apple right here. That's sort of smelling at this point. And it stays there for the course of the rest of the story, continually rotting. And there's constant references to how uncomfortable this is. It's a horrifying story because we feel abandoned by his parents, right? His parents are not acting the way humans should. In fact, nobody is. There's this sense of strong alienation from the community, the sense that everything that's going on is horrible. It's one of the reasons Kafka is so painful to read a lot of the time. But this actually only applies to a few of his stories. It applies to Metamorphosis, because Metamorphosis is a horrifying, horrifying tale of a guy who turns into a bug and is then killed over a long period of time. It applies to The Trial, which is the story of a guy who is locked in a trial that he doesn't understand and is gradually drawn through these processes until finally he gets stabbed at the end. But it does not actually fill all of his work. Kafka actually goes a lot weirder than that. I'm going to read aloud a few of his stories. A brief word on Kafka's work. Most of his stories are like a paragraph long. He wrote a few large stories. Metamorphosis, I think, is 32 pages or something. But by and large, all of his stories are this big. That little paragraph right there. That's a story. Which makes it really easy to read those aloud. So I am doing some injustice because I can't do his longer stories, but I can't really reference things that have not been read, so I'm going to do a lot of reading. So this one's sort of the simplest example of Kafka being kind of sociopathic. It's called Give It Up. It was very early in the morning, the streets were clean and deserted, I was on my way to the station. As I compared the tower clock with my watch, I realized it was much later than I had thought, and that I had to hurry. The shock of this discovery made me feel uncertain of the way. I wasn't very well acquainted with the town as yet. Fortunately, there was a policeman at hand. I ran to him and breathlessly asked him the way. He smiled and said, "You asking me the way?" "Yes," I said, "since I can't find it myself." Give it up, he said, and turned with a sudden jerk, like someone who wants to be alone with his laughter. That's sort of Kafka being a dick, encapsulated in one tiny moment. It's kind of horrifying and kind of banal. It combines these two aspects of something that's everyday and something that's just really mean. The sense that humans are not behaving towards each other the way they should be. And this is sort of a very small version of what you'll find in the Metamorphosis and The Trial and a few other of his works. And it's this that gives Kafka, I think, such a negative opinion. And Kafka does have a negative opinion. Whenever you hear something described as Kafka-esque, 99 times out of 100, that's meant in a bad way. You never, or most of us never, I do occasionally, but that's because I'm weird, refer to one of our friends as Kafka-esque and mean this as a compliment. This is a thing that doesn't generally happen, although all of my friends are Kafka-esque. I mean in a good way, that's what my talk's about. But there's something else going on in Give It Up. There's a sort of odd balance to the story. It's kind of light, kind of thin. It's not just that not a lot happens. It's there's no real emotional response. You don't hear what the main character thinks the policeman has been a dick. The policeman is not described as being mean. The one description of how he's acting is like someone who wants to be alone with his laughter. Which is certainly kind of cruel, but it's much more lighthearted, almost humorous, if in a very dark way. This is much more common in Kafka's work than any actual overt negativity. Let me go a bit further in this. There's a story called The Street Window, which is a very good example of why you should always fold pages and things before hoping to read aloud, because it means that you don't lose your place, as I have just done. The Street Window is one of the only stories in Kafka that actually comes out as fairly positive. And I'm stalling for time badly here because I just can't find a story. Found it. That would actually take longer, given that the section with short stories is so tiny. I'm going to flip through it in less time than it takes to get the table of contents and get back. So, this story is weird. Here it is. Whoever leads a solitary life, and yet now and then wants to attach himself somewhere, whoever, according to changes in the time of the day, the weather, the state of his business, and the like, suddenly wishes to see any arm at all to which he might cling, he will not be able to manage for long without a window looking onto the street. And if he is in the mood of not desiring anything, and only goes to his windowsill a tired man, with eyes turned from his public to heaven and back again, not wanting to look out and having thrown his head up a little, even then the horses below will draw him down into their train of wagons and tumult, and so at last into the human harmony. This is very interesting. On the one hand, this is a story. I mean, it sort of it is not quite a story. It's somewhere between a story and an essay, but it makes sense as a piece of short writing. It also, stylistically, feels a lot the same as Give It Up. These are by the same author, and you can sort of tell. But none of the negativity in Give It Up is here. This is almost a positive story, especially for someone who writes about alienation so much. He's talking about how you can inevitably be drawn into whatever he calls the human harmony, which is certainly not the way you describe a bad thing. It's very possible there's irony going on here. But the only irony that could be going on here, you'd have to get from outside the text, right? By itself, it just comes off as a fairly sweet, fairly standard story. It may be ironic, but you'd have to draw in other of Kafka's stories to read it that way. There are others that have the same feel. There's a story called The Way Home, and another one called The Southern Walk, both of which are much more positive. The story The Way Home contains the great line, my merits overpower me, although I don't put up much resistance, I grant you. Which is kind of amazing coming from someone as self-abusive as Kafka. Another story, and this one not necessarily uplifting, but much stranger, much more interesting in the exact combination of emotions it's drawing out. It's called An Imperial Message. The Emperor, so a parable runs, has sent a message to you, the humble subject, the insignificant shadow cowering in the remotest distance before the imperial sun. The Emperor from his deathbed has sent a message to you alone. He has commanded the messenger to kneel down by the bed, and has whispered the message to him. So much store did he lay on it, that he ordered the messenger to whisper it back into his ear again. Then by a nod of the head he has confirmed that it is right. Yes, before the assembled spectators of his death, all the obstructing walls have been broken down, and on the spacious and lofty mountain and open staircases stand in a ring the great princes of the empire. Before all these he has delivered his message. The messenger immediately sets out on his journey, a powerful and indefatigable man. Wow, that hurts. Now pushing with his right arm, now with his left, he cleaves a way for himself through the throng. If he encounters resistance, he points to his breast, where the symbol of the sun glitters. The way is made easier for him